The national emergency is avoiding a national emergency. That it is a strategic decision by the president. This is a geopolitical decision, and he is able to use the economic might of the U.S. to avoid a hot war. So why wouldn't we do that? You know, same thing. That what if we had a national emergency coming with these gigantic trade balances that we had with the rest of the world? I've been in financial markets for 30, 45 years. Much better to be strategic, avoid the emergency.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent with that, shall we say, circular logic pertaining to Greenland. President Trump is now imposing new tariffs on 8 European NATO allies in retaliation for their opposition to his push to acquire that island. The tariffs will start at 10% on February 1st, and they'll rise to 25% on June 1st. They will stay in place until a deal is reached on a U.S. purchase of Greenland. That's what Trump wrote in a Truth Social post over the weekend. The targeted countries responded with a joint statement condemning the move, saying it undermines transatlantic relations and risks, in their words, a dangerous downward spiral. In a call with Trump yesterday, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer told him that applying tariffs on allies for pursuing the collective security of NATO allies is wrong, and that European leaders emphasized NATO cooperation and sovereignty. Trump, meanwhile, continues to press the issue, posting late last night that, quote, NATO has been telling Denmark for 20 years that you have to get the Russian threat away from Greenland. Unfortunately, Denmark has been unable to do anything about it. Now it is time, and it will be done. And President Trump is now linking his threats against Greenland with not being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. In a letter to the Norwegian Prime Minister obtained by Bloomberg, the president wrote in part this: considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace. Trump went on to write that although, quote, thinking about peace will always be predominant, now Trump can think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. The president added, the world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. The Nobel Peace Prize, of course, however, is not decided by the Norwegian government, but instead is awarded by an independent committee. That's a fact the Norwegian Prime Minister tells Bloomberg he has explained to the president several times. Richard Haass, I mean, it would almost be parody if it wasn't so dangerous. First of all, President Trump, accepted someone else's Nobel Peace Prize last week. I would say not a good way to make you a frontrunner for next year's award is to try to seize a NATO ally's territory. And that's what this is. It is using tariffs against some of our closest friends, and again, refusing to rule out the use of force to take Greenland. An island, first of all, Denmark has said, you want to build a base? Go ahead. An island where they're saying, we're actually, yes, just do Russia and potentially China pose threats on the horizon? Maybe, nothing imminent. And that this is something, though, that would shatter our most successful alliance. And President Trump, his threats are only gaining steam.
Jonathan, we spend a lot of time on this show talking about tough issues. How do you deal with China and Taiwan? How do you deal with Russia and Ukraine? This might be the simplest issue that we've ever talked about. And the idea that it's reached this point is beyond absurd. If we want to have closer security and economic ties to Greenland, there's a case for doing that. So let's just posit that. Just do it. Send Marco Rubio over, the Secretary of State, and have him negotiate a deal. They are willing to do it. We have all the infrastructure diplomatically to do it already. There's also agreements. We want to increase American presence on the island. We have wound it down 99%. We can do that. We can do all this. We don't need a confrontation. We don't need tariffs. We don't need threats. We don't need mafia talk. So you have to ask yourself, what is going on here? The idea in foreign policy, it's like a new doctrine. It's new doctrine. It's the real estate doctrine of foreign policy. Unless you own something, it's not secure. Well, last I checked, we didn't own Europe, and NATO got through the Cold War without a war. We don't own Taiwan. China's not invaded Taiwan. So the idea you have to own things to protect them is preposterous. There is no historical basis for that. So you almost have to think we are trying to provoke a crisis with Europe. For a year now, this administration, beginning with J.D. Vance going over to Munich, has tried to start a cultural war with Europe. And what we see this now is playing out. You could be forgiven to think we are trying to wreck the most fundamental relationship we have had now for 3/4 of a century. And by the way, we are getting far along the road to succeeding, even if we quote unquote don't invade. I think Europeans now have come to see us as the threat. They no longer trust us to make good on our commitments to Europe. What we are doing is essentially turning upside down what has worked for 75 years, and we have nothing to put in its place.
That relationship led to American peace and prosperity, played a role for these 75 years as well. And it's also, of course, fulfilling Vladimir Putin's wildest dreams that NATO would be threatened like this. So a recent piece by the Wall Street Journal editorial board is titled The Greenland War of 2026. And it reads in part this way. For more than 75 years, the fondest dream of Russian strategy has been to divide Western Europe from the U.S. and break the NATO alliance. That is now a possibility as President Trump presses his campaign to capture Greenland, no matter what the locals or its Denmark owner thinks. Tariffs in the cause of bullying imperialism is the wrong way to make a deal, and they might stiffen opposition on the island and in Europe. No one should underestimate the shock his Greenland project is producing among allies. Along with his tariffs and his tilt toward Russia against Ukraine, he is alienating Western Europe in a way that will be hard to repair. Whether or not Mr. Trump believes it, the U.S. needs friends in the world. He seems to think that if he captures Greenland, history will remember him as another Thomas Jefferson, who took the Louisiana Purchase, or William Seward, who got Alaska. The cost of his afflatus to the U.S. interests will be greater than he imagines. And John Meacham, when we saw Seward's name in there, we were very grateful that we had you on the show already.
They were colleagues.
I was teed up for you very nicely there. So, yes, we have heard a lot about President Trump. Yes, maybe it's real estate doctrine. Maybe he wants to. He has a Western Hemisphere look here where he wants to dominate our part of the world. The Donroe Doctrine, in his words. But this is not the time of Thomas Jefferson. This is a very different time and place. And President Trump, to Richard's point, just seems to be wanting to blow up the established world order.
I believe in almost everything Richard Haass ever says. There's one thing I would just elaborate on, and what Richard just said, which is we don't need Greenland. We don't need this confrontation, but need, and I think that need is the critical word here. I think President Trump is self-evidently at this point has a need for these dramas. He has personalized our politics and our foreign policy in a way, and Richard, you check me, I really don't, and this is against my business model, I think this is unprecedented because this is a kingly pre-Glorious Revolution kind of autocracy where a king his feelings are hurt because of this prize obsession. And so therefore, the great power of the state, the panoply of power, is going to be deployed in the service of his own, and I'll just say it, emotional and I suppose political, although I can't believe that even the Trump base is all that. I don't think anybody woke up thinking, oh, my God, Greenland is the key to prosperity and the future of the middle class. And so I think we're living in a world where his own needs are dominating our policy. And I think, too, again, there's, as Richard says, I'm sure there could be a great case for doing this. That's fine. Make the case. That's the way we govern, right? 49.9% of the people who voted in November 2024 decided, yeah, let's try this again. But were they voting for all of this? And at what point, and to me, this is the critical question of the next 3 years, at what point do those voters somehow signal that they don't want a king? They don't want a monarch, that the Constitution still matters to them. How does that happen?
That is one of the great questions of our time. And Jackie Alemany, John Meacham he said correctly, this is not something that a lot of people wanted, even those who voted for President Trump. And you've got a new piece for MS Now noting that even some of his staunchest allies on the Hill are kind of quietly warning against this. That this is perhaps a rare moment where Republicans might break for Trump. So tell us more about how these allies are trying to seek some sort of off-ramp to get Trump off of Greenland.
Yeah, and I do want to be very clear before I go into the details of it. This could very well be a Sisyphean task. I mean, at the end of the day, we have not seen Republicans really successfully push back against Trump yet. But we are seeing a lot of hardline Republicans look at this and trying to redirect Trump's attention. The situation right now, as they kind of view it, is Trump is already getting everything and as much power as he could possibly have in Greenland because of the U.S. military presence and also because Denmark has already said so and been willing to concede more of the island to the U.S. and to Trump's whims. So what these Republican lawmakers are doing, some of whom are on the Greenland Congressional Caucus, which is led by Warren Davidson, who has a very good relationship with the president, is trying to redirect him to focus on ramping up commercial engagements and trade engagements, potentially presenting a compact of association, a diplomatic arrangement that we have with the Marshall Islands. That could be something that could be done as well. There's various options being thrown around, also doing a critical minerals deal similar to something that has already been hashed out with Ukraine. But again, as one person told me, this is a solution in search of a problem. And I think what it all does get at is this underlying idea that Trump's claim that this is a national security need is a pretext for something else. Now, I'm not quite sure what that something else is. Obviously, John and Richard just laid out that a lot of this is about Trump's psyche, his desire to potentially get his face on Mount Rushmore. But I do not think we should write off the possibility of economic coercion here and the rumors that are running rampant amongst Scandinavian embassies and Danish diplomats that this is potentially a bid to create more data processing centers and have again, more robust critical minerals engagement on the island in order to continue with the minerals that are needed for semiconductors. And there are a lot of people who are worried that the PayPal mafia, one of whom is the Danish ambassador at this point, are going to be involved in some sort of back channeling here in order to actually execute Trump's desire for territorial acquisition. The White House told us in a statement for this piece that essentially nothing short of that is going to be sufficient in terms of satisfying Trump on this issue.
Yeah, he has only doubled and tripled down on this. There are many reasons why he may want to acquire it. At the end of the day, it's not ours, and they don't want to give it to us. And yet, President Trump persists. MS Now's Jackie Alemany, really good piece. Thank you also for joining us this morning.